Hey guys, just a quick disclaimer. As always, we do not claim to be therapists or counsellors. We are just sharing our stories of experiences that we have had from someone with lived experience and someone who is a researcher and a practitioner. When you are listening to these stories, please take care of yourselves, as they can be a little bit heavy. There's some funny stories in there as well. Obviously, we are open to positivity in the comment section, please. Like I said, these are all truly based off people's lived experiences. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Love you, bye.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Voices Unlocked, and as promised, today we have an amazing special guest, which I will introduce in a minute. But today we're going to be talking all about an amazing organisation that I'm really proud to have been part of, called Incip. But before we do that, Liv and I would like to introduce you to the wonderful Ben Rakes, Dr Ben Rakes.
Yeah.
So before we deep delve into Incip, Ben, tell us, where are you at now in life? What's going on for you career-wise at the moment?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
We love having you here, Ben.
So, yes, I'm working at University Campus Oldham at the moment.
Amazing.
Teaching academic skills. And I have to say, they've been fantastically supportive. I've just started there, but they've given me the day to come and do this podcast.
Oh, amazing.
And it's such a wonderful, inclusive, supportive institution, so I'm really happy to be there. And so that's what I'm doing at the moment, basically.
And you've always been somebody that's developed people's potential. So helping students with their academic skills and making sure that they can be the best students. It kind of really still aligns with the work that you've done your whole life, whether it's been with children with parents in prison or children who've experienced care. You've always wanted to support the potential of young people. And I'm just trying to remember, we met many years ago, Ben, didn't we? 20 years ago?
We did, yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
It would have been about 20 years ago. Can you remember the first time we met? Was that in Holland, or was it before then?
It was. I think at that Impact conference in Holland.
An Impact conference in Holland. Yeah.
5.
Yeah, no, honestly. So, yeah, way before you came on the scene.
I was 5.
Me and Ben were already friends, and it was an amazing, really interesting conference where we were talking about experiences of the criminal justice system, weren't we? And it was specifically talking about, I think I was talking about women that had experienced going to prison and what they needed and what they were hoping for. And do you remember that conference?
I remember it very clearly, and I remember your presentation. Wasn't it about revolving door?
It was about people who were in, out, in, out, and why that, why the system wasn't really supporting those ladies.
And of course, that totally surreal moment when suddenly members of the audience dressed as judges started dancing, I think.
There was
the audience.
Liv, so the last episode, if you're a follower, Liv and I talked about international conferences that we've been on. But Liv, I have to say, of all the conferences, of which you've done many, the one that me and Ben went to was the most surreal experience that you could ever go to. It was
actually in a prison, wasn't it?
It was, and this guy dressed up as a judge, but he wasn't really a judge, but he started dancing down the aisle of the seats.
Can I ask what song it was to?
I don't think you'd think there was a song. I think he was just,
I think he just made his own song.
I think he was just freestyling.
Love it.
He had some mad wig on. And then I was on a panel of, experts, which was a privilege at the time, thinking, I was quite early on in my career.
And you've just got Jerry the Judge dancing down
Jerry
the aisle.
the Judge was dancing down the aisle. I had these headphones on, and because the questions were being said to me in Dutch, and I had a translator through my earpiece, and I was trying to work out what the questions were, get them translated, and try to sound, relatively intelligent. You missed out.
That was my time,
If that was your first conference, you'd have got up.
Dressed up as a judge with him. I would have been dressed as the governor of the prison, mate. I would have been like, yeah.
No, honestly, dressing up. Yeah, well, we were talking about dressing up in the last one when you were at
an old man with a top hat.
An old man with a top hat in our Switzerland conference. But anyway, we digress. But yeah, so Ben and I have known each other, and been to many conferences together, haven't we, over the years? But what I want to ask you about is you are one of the original founders of Incip. So do you want to just tell the audience what Incip stands for and why you thought it was important to set that organisation up?
Certainly, yes. So Incip stands for the International Coalition for Children with Incarcerated Parents. Bit of a mouthful.
Well said.
And really, I think the credit here has to go to somebody called Francis Suby, who runs an incredible organisation in Uganda called Wells of Hope, which supports children with parents in prison in Uganda by providing a boarding school and really good visits to parents. So when I was doing a project called Coping between 2010 and 2013.
That's right.
And that stands for Children of Prisoners, Interventions and Mitigations to Strengthen Mental Health. It's another long acronym. When I was doing Coping, Francis contacted Professor Adele Jones, who was leading that project. And he said, I've seen what you're doing in Europe, because that project was looking at the lived experience of children who are affected by parental imprisonment in Sweden, Germany, Romania, and the UK. And so he'd found it online, and he was in Uganda feeling he'd set up his own project, and he wanted to make a link, basically. And Francis's story is fascinating itself, to just digress a bit, that he was an electrician and he had a business partner, and he decided that he wanted to go alone because he didn't like his business partner's practices. And his business partner was so angry that he left him, that he basically bribed the police to trump up charges. So Francis himself spent about 60 days in a Ugandan prison.
Wow.
And while he was there, he saw the awful conditions that visits happened in. So families would travel miles and miles and miles on really bad roads across Uganda, only to have a 20-minute visit through a wire mesh, maybe little children being held up. But Francis, being very religious, believed that he was there for a reason, and he felt called to do something for these children, basically. So he made contact with the Coping Project, and I was very, very lucky. I actually went out to Uganda and I saw for myself what amazing work Wells of Hope do with the most meagre of resources. And Francis actually came and stayed with me in my house as well for a week.
Really?
So we got to know each other really well. And this is probably in about 2013, something like that. And he was saying, look, there are lots of organizations across the world championing the rights of children and parents in prison, but actually they're not joined up. They're all in isolation. And he felt very isolated in Uganda, but felt very comforted by sort of linking with the Coping Project. So really, he dreamt up this idea that we needed to join up organizations worldwide to have I suppose, something that was linking and supportive. And so it was really amazing. His idea. And but it all happened at the Prisoners' Families Conference in Dallas in 2015, actually. And Carolina Sparza, she allowed it'd always been very American, or even Texas-centered, but she kind of was persuaded by Francis to broaden it out into an international conference. And there a number of people gathered. So myself, Francis, Nancy Laux, various other people, and it was dreamt up. And then, of course, the inaugural conference was in New Zealand in 2017. So that's kind of how it all started. So I thought, I was so lucky to be doing the Coping Project and then have that link to Francis.
Amazing, because what we were talking about in our last episode about, the people that you meet and being open-minded, and you never kind of know what's going to come from those just initial connections, or inviting someone to stay in your house, or I think just being open-minded to possibilities. And Incip has just gone from strength to strength. I mean, I was really, really lucky that I got to go to that inaugural conference in New Zealand, which was, just an eye-opening experience. And I think, just learning about different cultures and what happens for children with parents in prison in different parts of the world. Because obviously at this point, I'd only really, been able to meet children with parents in prison from the UK and what they needed. But it's obviously hugely different contexts internationally, because, different laws, different prison visit regulations. Obviously, you've got like really, really challenging things like in America, you've got things like death row, which thankfully we don't have here in the UK. And but just like the opportunity to learn from different practitioners around the world. And then you led, after New Zealand, you then led the first UK INCCIP International Conference in Huddersfield. That was the second one, wasn't it?
That's right.
How was that? What was the experience of running that?
Well, that was fantastic, actually.
You went to that. Do you remember?
I remember very well. And I remember the links that you made, Liv, with
Anya,
other people across the world. But actually, the young people's panel, I think, is always the highlight of any INCCIP conference. And in Huddersfield, what I was so happy about, and you probably know this anyway, was that the young person's panel there talking about, how the individual impact of parental imprisonment, that you couldn't generalize and all the things that happen. Sitting, watching that was actually somebody who'd just taken on the role of kind of reshaping policies for prisons in Washington, DC. And she was there and she came up to me afterwards and said, I've seen the panel and I am going to completely change the way that corrections officers, as they call them in America, are going to be trained in Washington, DC. And it was just, I thought, wow.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah,
I don't know why I haven't processed that. That's amazing.
I think me and you spoke about that at the last
we
had a conversation the last conference about that. I don't know why I didn't feed that onto you. But no, me and Ben did speak about that.
So because of that panel, she decided to change the way that she was working, all the recommendations that she was making.
Absolutely, to foreground the impact of imprisonment on families. And I just thought, wow, if a conference achieves nothing else, but it achieved a lot more than that, that is just amazing.
Is that Avon?
Oh, no, actually, it was somebody.
Because I was just thinking she was Washington, D.C.
That's
based.
right. But it wasn't actually Avon. It was somebody who had come, she'd obviously seen the conference and she came and she was someone nothing to do with INCIP. And we haven't really had any we should really follow up actually and see where that's gone. That would have been perhaps better to do. But I just think, like you say, you don't know the ripple effects of what you do. But I do think that, and winding forward to the conference we had in South Korea just last year, and that youth panel was just incredible.
That was amazing with the Young Prodigy.
Yes.
Who was a delegation from Australia.
Shout out to Young Prodigy.
Shout out to Young Prodigy.
Amazing organisation.
Absolutely fantastic. So just driven people, really networked with them very well. And we were talking about when we were coming up with the youth panel, the ideas we were speaking about, obviously we were all speaking together, the Australian delegation, the young people from Korea who were absolutely just amazing young people. And to have that experience and that, because it was like a programme, wasn't it? It was like we had like a programme where we were going to see South Korea and all network together and get to know one another before we did this panel. And I remember Maya saying to me and speaking to Maya, and we were saying that, we need to everyone do things together and get to know people and see what they want to speak about on the panel. And because we didn't get much time to come up with because so many people had so many amazing ideas and you've got to fit them all into this panel. It was very much how do we fit it all in? So during the times, our down times, we'd be breaking it down and everyone had the same point of view and everyone was more not have the same opinion, but they related to one another and we were empowering each other by what we were saying and what we were doing and what we wanted to change. And it was very impactful. I remember to the point where I was saying to Maya, we having a youth team with INCIP would be amazing, or having one of the young people, because I'm not a young person anymore when I get to December. I know I'm not a young person anymore, but I stand very firm on, which I've told Lorna a lot, even though I'm not classed as a young person anymore, my mum being away will still affect me at that age. It'll affect me at 26, 36, 46. It's something I'll carry on through my life. So being some form of I'd not like leader, but like
Yeah.
someone who,
I was going to say leader.
yeah, like speaking to these younger people who were obviously going to be coming in as
Yeah.
like youth ambassadors and things like that, having like that like small little
Developing other
part
young
and
people
developing them into experience, and what you experience at the conference is amazing. It's honestly, I remember the first time going to Huddersfield and doing Incip. It was one of the best experiences ever.
Oh, so glad.
I wholeheartedly loved it. So like when South Korea came up, there was no, because I'm not a big fan of flying, especially long haul flights.
That was a flight.
And that was a flight. And normally, if it was anything else, I'd be like, I'm not travelling that far.
But it's because it was Incip.
But because it was Incip, I was like, there's no way I'm missing that. Like, there's no way, because the conference meant so much to me. Like, I feel like I went to that conference and come back a different person with a different mindset from networking and meeting other people. Because obviously we were speaking about other conferences that we'd done, but because this one was solely based on the topic it is of what like I've experienced and other young people experience, it was just phenomenal.
Purely
it was
about
just,
parental imprisonment.
yeah, and every single person there is wanting to make a change for our families and for us, and to have people like that on your side and backing you.
Yeah.
You don't get that every day. So to even sit there and talk about your story and what changes you want to make, and people actually giving you the ear to listen.
Just to be listened to, I think is phenomenal. And then for people to actually take action from what they're learning, because that was a privilege, because you invited me to be the kind of youth panel lead. We had like a young person from the Isle of Man, didn't we? And obviously I was bringing like a UK delegation, but it was, and you don't know how it's going to go. You know, you invite young people to share what they want to share, but you can't micromanage that situation. And it was an incredible privilege to like be part of that. Can I just say as well, like one of my memories. I
always want to be part of it, please. Can I always stay part of Incip?
Of course. But you know, so during arranging, you know, what the youth program was going to be in Huddersfield, I was looking like around the area for activities, like fun activities, you know, like, and I was thinking about, you know, like, is there anywhere to go bowling or go-karting or something? And then, you know, there wasn't a huge amount of options, but then I found out that there was these escape rooms. And then I was like, oh yeah, no, that'll be fun. We'll do an escape room. But then there was like one particular theme, which was like a prison-based escape room. And I was like, not quite sure as the youth lead that I should be putting these young people in a prison-based escape room.
I went with the little kids.
I think you ended up doing like Alice in Wonder. Oh, Harry Potter.
I did Harry Potter. But I remember walking into that escape room and I just tapped Lauren and I was like, hey.
Yeah, not the cops and robbers
not
one.
Not the cops and robbers, please. I mean, very fitting for where we're at.
We did Harry Potter.
We'll do the magic one instead. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we stuck to magic, which I think is also a really nice theme. But yeah, so Ben, like honestly, like all kudos to you for like just being, you know, with Francis, like founding this like phenomenal organisation, and it's been running now for. It's four conferences have happened, but it's been like every 2 years. So it was New Zealand, then it was Huddersfield in UK, and then it was America. But that was during COVID times, which we've got a story about.
We've got a story to tell you
about.
We'll come back.
So it was New Zealand, Huddersfield, America, which should have been in Washington, DC, but we had to do it online because it was COVID. And then obviously the last one was South Korea. Yeah. Do we have any ideas where the next one might be?
Well, we're looking at that. There is a idea it might be in Zimbabwe, actually.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
But we're just looking at whether that...
Options.
Yeah, whether it's safe, whether it's inclusive for everybody. But that is currently being considered.
Oh,
so
amazing.
But it's still open.
Yeah. But let's just deep delve for a second into the online conference that we did for the Washington, DC one. And we had young people from Australia. The time zone challenge was challenging. So we had UK time zone, Australian time zone, and Ugandan time zone, and I think Canadian time zone to navigate young people coming online and sharing their experiences. And I'd obviously like invite Liv to everything, and I'd messaged Liv and I was like, it's an online conference this year because it's COVID times. Do you want to join? And she was like, yeah, I'll join. And everybody's popping up on their screens online. Liv comes on, you could have just stayed in bed. Liv comes on screen and half of her face is like down here. And I was like, what the hell has happened to Liv?
Long story short, I didn't have a chance to get in touch with Lorna beforehand. And what had happened was I was sick. It weren't COVID. I did a COVID test. I didn't have COVID.
You had like the flu,
I had the
basically,
flu, but I hit it in the chest. When I get it in my chest bad. So it was like a chest infection. Now, because my body was stressed because I was sick and it was trying to fight off the infection, the left side of my brain got inflamed.
Oh, no.
Which caused me to have Bell's palsy. So an hour before the conference, I was coming out of the Royal Hospital in Liverpool because
that's how committed she is.
They thought I was having a stroke.
That's horrendous.
Thought I was having a stroke.
No.
And Lorna was like, are you okay to do this? I was like, yeah, I'm great.
Didn't bother to tell me she's just come out the hospital.
On morphine. They had me on gas and air and everything. I was on the lot. I was like, yeah, I can do this conference. Don't you worry about it. Come on, turn the camera on. My full face was... I had an eye patch on because I got an eye infection.
I was texting Liv going, what is wrong with your face and why are you currently online? She was like, no, I need to be here. Of course, I'm happy to be here. Total commitment.
That's how much I love Incip. Okay, guys.
So Ben, what for you has been like, your highlights of Incip, or like what's made you like proud of Incip? I don't know, over either any of the conferences or like, what makes you happy about the organisation?
I mean, like I said before, I think the youth panels have been amazing. And that one in South Korea, it was so complex what you were talking about, I remember. And do you remember you were talking about resilience?
Yeah.
And that's always been, when we did the coping project, the whole project was premised on what would help young people with a parent in prison remain resilient. So that was, and resilience has always been a positive thing. Yeah. But the way you and the other people on that panel interrogated the idea of resilience and actually were saying, no, I remember some of the South Korean young people saying, oh yeah, I might have looked resilient, but actually I wasn't, I was breaking up inside, but I had to present this front, to my family that I was okay. And actually having that idea that you should be resilient could be quite oppressive, and honestly, I took so much learning from that. And I know other people did as well, that I'm quite cautious now when I talk about resilience. And obviously resilience is a good thing. Yeah. But just as an example of the discussion, and we're really hoping actually that you might be able to recreate that discussion
of course.
In a webinar, so that because it was so powerful and so nuanced, and I suppose from lived experience, and so I think that is always a highlight. Of course, in any conference, I think having people there who you can link with and unexpected people who you meet, and real experts like, sadly, the late Anne Adelis Estrin, who pioneered this research, in the States. And she did a fantastic address, didn't she, at the New Zealand conference about the 12 principles and meeting Anne. And then when she came to Huddersfield, actually, weeks, talking to her. And so I think networking is a huge thing, isn't it? And I think there's always, I suppose, in a way, the difficulty is that those who are from resource-constrained countries are much less likely to be able to make it to these conferences. And it's always, I suppose, it's always good to network with people. Yeah. I suppose it might be online or hopefully face-to-face, but you learn so much from, for example, the Ugandan experience. And I suppose, I've learned so much from Francis, actually, about how there are commonalities for young people who have a parent in prison, but then some of these things are so amplified in different countries. And I was just reflecting on the trainers I came over about some of those situations, which I don't know if is that something would be useful to just talk about. I mean, I'm just thinking like, say in England or maybe perhaps in Western countries, if you have a mother or father in prison, then it makes a big difference if you have your dad go to prison, generally you'll stay in your home with your
Exactly.
mum. But of course, if your mum goes to prison, it's a completely different story. It's very disruptive, and very few children remain in the home they're in, and you live with grandparents, etc. But in Uganda, basically, because for a woman to survive, she needs to be married. That if her husband goes to prison, then she has no means to support herself, and her only hope is to remarry, in a sense. And so children, but I think Francis used this word that in that situation, mothers would divest themselves of their children because they wouldn't be able to remarry if they had children, in tow, as it were. And so basically, whether your mum or your dad goes to prison in Uganda, you're incredibly vulnerable. And I suppose the vulnerabilities that children in Uganda face are just unthinkable, really. If you're lucky, you might go and live with your grandparents. But we heard how even within families, that say you had cousins and you had one cousin who didn't have a parent in prison and one who did, that families would stigma attached to these children so that the child with a parent in prison would have less, generally. So,
Just
for example,
give them less,
the child who, didn't have a parent in prison would sleep on a mattress and a bed. But if you had your parents in prison, you might then be sleeping on a mat, for example. And that was quite deliberate because it was somehow the family showing their disapproval. And even charities, Francis was saying, in Uganda, will kind of turn their back on families affected by imprisonment because of that stigma, but there are awful things like child sacrifice, would you believe, in Uganda is a big thing still, and we were told that every building in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, the foundations would have a child's skull within the foundations because that was seen to bring luck and the building wouldn't fall down. But of course, those children were sacrificed by witch doctors. So when you kind of start to think about that, and maybe some children might go into, be domestic servants, but that could be a kind of cover for basically sexual exploitation. So, these things just played out in such a magnified, deeper way. So I suppose I think, and the more you think about how this issue plays out across the world, the more you kind of see that happen. And simple, not simple things, but things which I remember when going to Uganda, we visited a women's prison, and I remember vividly the women wearing this awful kind of uniform, which was like a kind of, a sort of recycling bag, basically. Like a sort of plastic recycling bag. And the women would have numbers written on their uniforms basically in a marker pen, and you could see how long someone had been in a prison by how faded their number was.
Wow.
And I remember talking to one mum, and she was telling me her story, and it was just horrific, that basically she'd been, I think her younger son was ill. She went to a hospital with him. And then while she was away, there was some kind of conflict between her stepson and her husband or something. Anyway, somebody got killed in all that. And she came back, and the police was always commotion. And the police said, "Oh, where have you been, man?" She said, "Oh, I've been at the hospital, with my younger son." So how can you prove that? She said, "Well, look, here's the prescription or whatever." So she gave the police the evidence. And then the next day they came back and they arrested her for murder, basically. And I just couldn't believe this. And I said, "But what did your lawyer do? Surely." And she said, "I don't have a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer."
Oh.
So she was sat there in prison. I mean, luckily she was given a death penalty,
But she was serving time for murder that she didn't
wasn't
commit.
even present, and the evidence she'd given, and yet there was nobody to advocate. And so you've got so many people in prison with no legal representation, people waiting absolutely years and years for their trials to come up. And it was just unbelievable.
Just shows
really.
you that, the vulnerability and the disparity across the world, which is, why I guess organisations like Incip to bring these issues, to light. Exactly. And it is more common, isn't it? In certain, I was the supervisor for a PhD student who looked at children with parents in prison in Nepal.
I know very well.
Yes, exactly. So, and he spoke at one of our conferences, I think. But I know that it's much more common in areas like that for the children to go into like a residential, like children's home.
Yes.
And actually that the children that he'd interviewed in Nepal, and it might be similar, I don't know, in Uganda, but the children that were interviewed actually felt that they were more privileged to go into the home because they were getting food, shelter, community and education. And actually the families saw that as a huge win, that the children were going into a home because they were getting all of those that support, skills, they were getting schooling rather than being kept at home with family members where, like, as you've just said, there's so much kind of shame and...
Yeah, absolutely. Because we spoke to dads as well when we, in the male prison in Uganda, because some of them are on death row, although the death penalty's sort of been suspended in Uganda, but they're serving long sentences or on death row. They didn't expect ever to be released. But they said, our lives might be over, but we're so happy that our children are, at Wells of Hope. They're learning English, which was the passport to kind of greater things. And Wells of Hope not only provide kind of primary education, but they also support secondary education, even university. So absolutely, these kind of residential settings can be really helpful.
Beneficial.
Beneficial. And I suppose you've kind of had different experiences of community literally through all these like conferences, Time Matters support groups, so even though you were like, obviously we don't have that in the UK, it's like you've had your community through all these other ways. But yeah, I mean, South Korea, like what an experience. You're right, like just circling back, like that conversation about resilience did make me think, because I'll always say, the kids from Time Matters, they're so strong, they're so brave, they're so resilient. But it did make me think, like, you've got to be really careful about how you use language, because it's okay not to be strong and it's okay not to be brave.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we were all coming from, because I went to a little youth-led day. So there was a youth-led day in Birmingham for Belgrave Trust. Did a youth-led day for a cohort who gave us the funding for the podcast, Challenge and Change.
Yeah, Belgrave Trust have funded this podcast.
Great.
So shout out to Belgrave.
Shout out to you. And I did a little wellness workshop when I was there. I got to choose a workshop to do. And I thought I'll do the wellness, mental health type of thing, because obviously I'm doing this podcast once a week and it's a lot of things that are getting brought up that kind of not open old wounds, but obviously I say it affects me all the time.
Yeah. You're not a robot. You can't not.
They were talking about resilience and it made me think back to South Korea. And I've always said, especially in Time Matters, it's okay not to be okay. Exactly. And I think when the question come up of resilience, I was kind of conflicted in my brain, because it was like, but you don't have to be resilient though. You shouldn't have to be resilient. You might not feel resilient, and you put a mask on and try to be resilient. Or especially young boys who have a dad away, they might feel the need to be the man of the house. I have to be the man of the house now. Or young people who are going to live with grandparents, I need to look after my grandparents and make sure that they're okay. And you do have that mask on, but at the end of the day, obviously you still are a child who wants to have normal experiences. But I learned that my resilience doesn't come from me. I think I am a resilient person, I will say that. But it doesn't come from me, my resilience. I feel most resilient when I am at an Incip conference, when I'm at Time Matters. I get my resilience from other people. So other people create resilience for me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Everyone on that panel, I was doing the panel speaking about resilience and felt resilient in that moment because of the army I had behind me sitting at that panel.
Nicely said.
And that's where resilience comes from. When you actually break resilience down, it's not individualised, it's not self-resilience, it's what you create around and the people you surround you with that makes you resilient in a way.
100%. Yeah, it's like an
Because
army
without
of kindness.
that support, without them conferences, without me being able to have these other people listen to me and listen to my story and want to make change for other young people around the world, like the children in Uganda and things like that, that is what builds them resilience. That is what gives them that push, that motivation. But it's also, it's okay not to be resilient. It's okay to let it affect you. And if you want to have a bed rot day, you have a bed rot day. If you're feeling low, allow yourself to have them emotions. It's okay. You don't have to be strong
all the time.
And people shouldn't see you as that, oh, you must be so resilient because of what you've gone through or because of what you're dealing with. You must be so resilient. It gives you a complex of, oh, I don't feel that resilient. Maybe I do need to be. Like, what? Maybe I need to be this person that I'm not.
Yeah.
To show people that, like, I'm like, you overcompensate when you don't need to.
Yeah, 100%. So hopes for the future for INCCIP, what do you think, like, because it's gained strength upon strength upon strength. I mean, if you think back to the very first conference, we had one young person speak in New Zealand, one young person who shared her story about having a dad in prison.
Yep.
And she actually wrote a book, didn't she?
Madison.
Yeah, so she wrote a book, and then obviously at the Huddersfield we had a whole panel of people, and then in America, well, not in America but online, there was loads of young people that joined, and then that was a huge cohort in South Korea, wasn't it? And I think the theme of South Korea, wasn't it, like stand firm?
Stand firm.
Stand firm.
Yeah,
like stand firm to your beliefs. And you
and
did.
You absolutely did on that panel.
Yeah, business.
Yeah. Like, so yeah, if you could like wave a magic wand, Ben, like what would you hope for next? Whether it's for INCCIP or just generally, or
And one fantastic thing is that, and really thanks to Nancy Laux through her leadership, INCCIP now has consultative status with the UN. And it takes ages to get that because you have to apply and then you have to fill in loads of forms and then you have to wait about 3 years. But it means that if there's anything that's being looked at by the UN on this subject, INCCIP will be able to input and be a partner really to fashion policy and things going forward. So I think that's huge, absolutely massive.
That's amazing.
So that feels wonderful. I think
what an achievement. Can we just do a shout out to Nancy?
Shout out to Nancy.
Because she is one phenomenal professor based up in Scotland, runs an incredible charity called Families Outside.
Let's get Nancy on.
I'd love to get Nancy on. Nancy, we're getting a date in the diary, but she is a leader and a force of, just a force of nature. Like, she is somebody that just like really wants to make change, and she makes change at an international level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hats off to Nancy. But to the fact that we're a consultant to the UN, like,
is amazing, isn't it?
Amazing.
But I think the other thing is to develop much more in terms of youth involvement in INCCIP, not just at conferences, but in fact, at this very moment, we're looking at having kind of really a youth board, if you like. And there are huge challenges, like you said, about time zones and things like that. But they're not unassailable. We can manage that. And I think having that constant input from young people between conferences, and because after all, it's all about change for young people affected by this. So
giving children a voice, isn't it? That's
exactly.
We follow anyway within like safeguarding children, and children's voice always needs to be heard and stuff. So.
But if we manage to pull off the webinar to have a similar discussion to when we had in South Korea, maybe that could be, a wonderful start to that. We could develop on from that.
No, that'd be amazing.
So I think, those are two things I've got in my mind. But I think INCCIP is fantastic in terms of having all these international partners. Yeah. So, for example, during COVID, there was a call to say, how have prison visits been changed by COVID? So, within a couple of weeks, you could have responses from across the world to that question. So I think that's something very unique about Incip, that we can kind of gather information very quickly on an international scale, if that makes sense. And we've got representation, from all the continents, so many different countries now, and we're mapping it, trying to kind of understand which organisations are working where, and so I feel like it's really coming to fruition at the moment, and of course it's under there's a co-chairs, if you like, of the board with Hamid and Julie, and I think they're going to take it in different directions as well. So
definitely,
but it feels like a time of activity, it's really funny. I mean, there's been emails just today. I was looking on the train about kind of increasing youth involvement. So that's really good.
Yeah, 100%. And more I think I'm going to be doing a webinar with Hamid in the next few months about children that don't have any contact, and just to be able to have those opportunities to not just raise awareness, but actually like change policy and practice through this organisation. And, well done to you for starting that like conversation with Francis and going, and just believing in it. Yeah. Like the power of belief and open-mindedness and tenacity, and like honestly, hats off to you, Ben. It's always been
very
a
much
pleasure
a joint effort
working with you over the years.
Well, likewise, absolutely.
I
both
know.
of you.
It's been amazing to have you on the podcast as well. Like, I think every time I see Ben anyway, we always have a good little catch up.
We do.
Always.
We do, yeah.
And I think the first time I met Ben, I remember just feeling, I was very nervous when I was going to the conference, and I don't know why, because I'd done conferences in the past, but like I said before, because of what it was based on. And I remember meeting Ben and just feeling so welcomed and like so warm, because when you walk into certain places, especially, I'm not going to lie, there has been conferences I've gone to, and, people have got things not wrong, but they've had their opinions.
Yeah, or you felt emotional.
And I felt like, sometimes I haven't been heard, or, they have an idea of what a child goes through, and you can tell that they actually haven't spoke to the children. I think when I met Ben, it was very much like my voice was heard straight off the bat. I felt comfortable. I was so happy to be there, and you're just a great person to talk to. I love catching up with you all the time.
That's lovely feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. Loving to know what's next.
I know. So what we always love to do, Ben, at the end of our podcast is we like to finish with something that we're grateful for. And I'm just going to jump right in there and start, because I'm really grateful for a time that you and I, with my daughter Matilda, had this impromptu support group in the middle of a cafe. Where was that?
That was in New Zealand.
That was
Arizona.
That was in Arizona. So we went
to
a conference in Arizona, and I think Matilda must have been about 10 or something. And Ben, Matilda and me were sitting in this cafe, and Matilda had been to that many support groups over the years that all of a sudden she suddenly decided to like host a mini support group with Ben and I. And we ended up really engaging with it and started opening up and really talking about our feelings. And we came away from this, 20-minute support group that my 10-year-old had just fashioned in this coffee shop, going, that was a really powerful experience. I'm really happy that we had that. So I'm going to finish with, I'm grateful for that moment, many, many, many thousands of moments that you and I have shared together over the years. But that moment in particular, thank you, Matilda, and thank you to you for that moment. I will always remember it.
Well, I'll always remember that. It was so special, and it made me feel quite emotional remembering it, because I remember we did give our heart and soul to it, didn't we?
We did. We committed.
We really did. And Matilda was a fantastic facilitator.
She really was.
We were just, it was
a magic moment. It was a magic
moment. It really
moment.
was, yeah.
What about you, Liv? We'll give the last word to Ben about gratitude, but we'll go for you.
I'm just grateful to be part of it all, really. And
an Incip youth ambassador.
I'm grateful to be an Incip youth ambassador. No, I really am. I'm grateful for the experiences I've had in every single one of the conferences, even if I was online with half my face not working. No, but I really am. I think South Korea was another one where I was like, wow, like that panel. I'm grateful for that panel. I'm grateful that we did stand on our business, and, we did stand firm. Yes. No pun intended. No, really am. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
That's what I'm grateful for.
Ben, last words to you. What are you grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for all the opportunities I've been given to travel to Uganda, and I suppose also the serendipity in some ways, because before I came to Huddersfield University, where, I did most of my research, I was running a parenting project at Style Prison. And, little did I know that when I left, because I was working for Action for Children, a charity, so I left that role as project manager to take up my academic role. But at that very moment, the coping project was being dreamt up. And I have to say, Professor Adele Jones, I think I'm so grateful to her, because it was a funny thing. My boss said, somebody needs to meet this new professor we've got. Did anyone volunteered? I thought, that sounds interesting. So I volunteered. And when Adele heard that I'd been working, doing this parenting group at Style Prison, she said, oh, wow, we need that experience for this new project. And I thought the serendipity and the timing of that. But I felt she was like my fairy godmother, really, because she was so supportive and, really believed in me and kind of got me on board. And in fact, I was running the child-centered aspects of the coping project, which is a massive privilege.
Yeah.
So, and I think all those connections that have come from that, and, and I suppose all those people I've met at various different conferences, like you say, it has been very strengthening as well. I know exactly what you're saying, Liv, I should say, about, resilience and having that kind of backup. It really makes a difference, doesn't it? Because not everybody has the same view on this issue. And like even, the taxi coming in today, and the guy said, so what takes you to a podcast studio? And I was explaining, and he said, yeah, but what's the point of that, And I think, I kind of hopefully changed his mind a bit. But you have to, there's a hostile world out there, isn't there? And so I feel grateful to be part of this community. And it was so affirming for you to invite me on this podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So lovely
for
to
coming.
be here and, to affirm that part of my identity and my life, really.
And thank you to Oldham University for allowing you to come.
I'm so grateful. Yeah, so grateful.
Yeah. Oh, no, thanks, Ben. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As usual, we will see you hopefully at the next episode, where we're going to welcome an amazing woman called Sarah Beresford, Beresford, OBE. So look out for that one. Keep yourself safe, and as always, reach out if you have any questions.
The email's going to be at the bottom.
Email somewhere. At the bottom.
Email at the bottom. Email us.
Yeah. Love you, everyone.
Yeah. Love you. Bye.
Bye.